Next question is from our dear friend Magnitude Rev. Hello, Magnitude Rev. And you have two-part question. Okay, great. What are some films that you enjoyed or even loved in college that you aren't too fond of nowadays? Okay. And what are some films that you disliked in college that you love or admire today? Okay, that's a good question, or those are good questions. Now let me address the first one, which is what are some films that you enjoyed or even loved in college that you aren't too fond of nowadays? This is probably for me the harder of the two questions to answer, but recently I have been rewatching a lot of the Star Trek films because I'm a big fan of Star Trek. And one of the films, and I love, for example, the series and Next Generation. And I also watched, when they were released in theaters, all the films. I remember, for example, when one of my earliest memories of going to the cinema. I don't remember the entirety, but I have these fragments of memories in my head of going to see Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. And so I think I recall that we were a little bit late going into the theater, and so we got into the theater just when it was about to start and had that prologue that starts that film, if you know that film, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. And then so ever since then I've been watching the films when they were released. And so the film from the Next Generation, the films perhaps are, let's see, when Star Trek First Contact came out, I was so into it. I thought it was great, and I must admit, I saw Generations, which came before it, and so I had certain feelings coming out of the theater after watching Generations. But then when First Contact came out, wow, this is exciting, and it was the Borg, and it was a retelling of a lot of what was those great episodes from the Next Generation. And so the film First Contact was great, but I must say that I don't hate the film, but perhaps as I got a little bit older, for certain reasons, maybe the impact of that film was lessened somewhat. And that's not necessarily because of the number of times I watch the films, because there are other films where I watch a number of times and the impact is either sustained or perhaps heightened. But for that film, there was a sense of maybe the impact being lessened. And there are some reasons for that. And actually the reasons, I think, for me, can be identified within how the film's content and how some of the characters' actions compare with how those same characters were reacting to similar Borg situations in specific episodes of the Next Generation. And so I think about those episodes, and I think about First Contact, and I feel like there is a bit of oh, there's some thunder outside my window. So, but anyway, I feel like there's a little bit of, I'm not sure if inconsistency is the right word, but there might be some, I'm not sure how I am able to view those. And so maybe because of that, my feelings on First Contact might have lessened a little bit over time. That's not to say that I dislike the film. And so I'm still very fond of the film First Contact, and I'm very fond of the films overall, the Next Generation series. But that might be an example. And maybe one day I will try to articulate that more fully in a separate video, because actually at the moment, I don't want to give too much away, but actually at the moment I am thinking about going through each of the Star Trek films. And so maybe for a discussion series or something one of these days, live streams, I don't know, but I would like to I'd love the opportunity to talk about First Contact. I still love that film. There are moments that are so thrilling and exciting, but again, maybe my feelings about it have changed versus how I felt about it when I first saw it in the theater. So that might be a way that I would answer that question. And then the second question is, what are some films that you disliked in college that you love or admire today? And I think for me, it would be the one that I've mentioned a lot in past videos is the Fellini film 8½, Otto e Mezzo. And so when I first saw that, I forget exactly when, but it was in my teenage years. I didn't like it at all. And I saw it on a VHS tape, and it wasn't letterboxed. It was cropped, and the subtitles, I don't understand the Italian language, unfortunately, and so I had to rely on the English subtitles of that particular VHS copy. And it was one of those where it was the white subtitle burned onto the film, and so sometimes on a black and white film that can be very difficult to make out. So I was struggling with that a little bit, not being able to read the subtitles occasionally, and also just not quite understanding the nature of the film, especially in this cropped fashion that I was watching it in that VHS tape, and also not being able to understand and keep up with the various points of the story. And so I was lost. I was absolutely lost when I first saw it, and that created a sense of frustration on my part. And that feeling of frustration lasted every time I tried to watch that Fellini work. And then I must say, when I was able, maybe later, to watch, or to be able to, say, obtain, say, a Criterion release of that film, and also see it in a better presentation, for example, plus the added aspect of growing up and having life experience, and say having experience with relationships in my life, and meeting people in my life, and eventually getting married, having a family, settling down, and then getting that life experience under my belt, so to speak. And then in that context, I would watch the film again. And then I felt like I could, while maybe I wouldn't say that I recognize or I sympathize with every single aspect of that film and that character or those characters, I can say that maybe because of the life experience that I was able to experience in my own personal situation, that I could look at that film from a different vantage point. And because I was able to look at it from a different vantage point, I think I was able to become more engaged with the film. And as I became more engaged with that film, I began to really admire what it was trying to do in terms of a capturing of a wholly subjective experience, in terms of creative control or non-control and turmoil that leads into personal crises, and how to reconcile these crises, and how to reconcile one's own faults and failures, and one's own inability to view the world and the people around one, and how to try to break free from that. And while acknowledging all the faults and foibles that occupy this particular character. And indeed, perhaps in parallel, it makes one recognize one's own faults and see how perhaps one might try to reconcile that type of tension in our own lives. And so in that way, I felt I was able to achieve a kind of engagement with that film over a course of time. And so 8.5, that would be my way of answering that question. But great questions, my friend. And so I now ask the questions to the audience, which is, what are some films that you enjoyed or even loved in college that you aren't too fond of nowadays? And what are some films that you disliked in college that you love or admire today? I'd love to hear your thoughts about these, my friends. Please feel free to leave behind your responses in the comment section below. And to Magnitude Rev, thank you, my dear friend. And cheers.